Our next framework speaker, so to speak, is Naki, who probably needs no introduction, but I think he's going to take a little time to also address colleagues from IIASA. So Naki, please.
Thank you, Jackie. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to submit that I'm quite overwhelmed by seeing so many colleagues, so many friends of IIASA, so many personal friends here. So as Jackie said, I will take a few moments to make a kind of a personal remark. I came first time to IIASA in 1973 and was offered a 4-month contract as a research assistant. And who would believe it's 40 years later, I'm in my 40th year of affiliation with IIASA and second decade of the affiliation with the Vienna University of Technology. So I, of course, cannot mention everybody who was so important, I think, in the history of IIASA, but I do want to mention one person, Howard Reifa, who is sitting with us here in the first row. On your right. And I'm mentioning Howard not only because he was the first director who gave me the 4-month contract, but because he was the founding director. Without Howard, I think we would not see IIASA as we see it today. And if you want to read about the IIASA history as a bridge between East and West, his memoirs, I think, tell a great story that are displayed up there. But I also want to briefly mention other directors that I had the privilege to work for under their leadership. Roger Levion, who is also sitting here, Buzz Halling, somewhere in the back, I don't see him. Then our late directors, Tom Lee, Bob Pry, Peter Dejanossi, and Gordon MacDonald. I'm really happy to say that Monica Dejanossi and Margaret MacDonald are with us. And I also had the privilege to work with our most recent director, Arne Jernlöv, Len Hordijk, then Stan Nielsen, Detlof von Wiltefeld, and now with Pavel. So it has been a real pleasure. I think IIASA has, and a privilege, IIASA has achieved quite a lot in these 4 decades. I mean, if you think about complex systems, integrated assessment, sustainability science, IIASA has been on front of those topics. And I think, as Jeff said, perhaps over the next 40 years, IIASA can help shape the science that we need for the policies in the Anthropocene. And so for that, I think transformation is required, and that leads me to the substantive part of my talk. If you look at this graph, and I apologize, it's double log, but it's relatively easy to understand. This is years before present. If we go a million years back, the hunter-gatherers were making tools in the Stone Age, but the global population hovered very little. And then something really dramatic happened about 7,000 years ago. Humans settled on this planet, built canals, cities, and the agriculture developed, the so-called Neolithic Revolution. And let me just make a caricature out of that, but the global population increased from 7 to 700 million. 100-fold in this period, and the niche of humanity expanded enormously. And the next phase, the so-called Industrial Revolution, was truly explosive. As you all know, we have now 7 billion people in the world, so population increased 10-fold, but the economic output 100-fold, greenhouse gas emissions 30-fold. That is pushing the planetary boundaries. And as we look forward, and this is based on my work of my colleagues at IIASA. You'll hear more from Wolfgang Lutz about that. If we look forward, we'll be probably peaking at about 9 billion and declining below the current level. So much larger population, but the population with higher capacity. So I have great hope that we can manage the Anthropocene. But I think for that, and I would like to say it stronger than Jackie, business as usual is not an option. We need a major transformation. So the question is, what do we know about the drivers of the major transformation? And again, I'm building on the work of my colleagues, but also the German Government's Council on Global Change. I see John Schellenhuber, who chairs it, sitting up front, and Dirk in the back, Dirk Messner. And I think that came up in the high-level meeting. I think we need normative stories. We need the narratives and the visions. That's what we need for the future. The social contracts one mentioned, going back to Rousseau. Think of the abolishment of slavery. It was such a fundamental transformation of the society, probably only possible because we had industrial revolution that made it possible to replace human and animal muscle power by inanimate one. Participatory governance, large associations of states like EU, these are the great hopes. One of the drivers are the crises as well. Jeff talked about the gales of creative destruction from Schumpeter. I think the main driver driver of those gales of destruction is the fact that the business as usual is not working and gives the opportunities to the pioneers of change. So that can be also natural disasters. And the big motor is technology in its broader institutional sense. Think of the replacement of carriage and horses by cars, or a convergence of technologies in what we call now IT revolution. And completely new is the knowledge society. If ozone layer, I think we managed to resolve through the precautionary principles, but climate change, hopefully we'll do that as well with many benefits. So that's the point I'm trying to make. And I think we need to see this in the context of three grand transformations that are, I think, already occurring. The first one is that half of the global population, if you see here, 50% already has secondary or better education. On the primary education, we are even better, 80%. And in coming decades, by the middle of the century, perhaps half of the global population will have secondary or higher education. That's really important. Another process that's undergoing is that half of the global population today lives under participatory government. And I think that means working together with the civil society. That might be increasing, going to 80%, again, making a fundamental difference in how we make the decisions and how the scientific narratives are taken by the society. This is an illustration. We just tried to reconstruct that, the abolishment of slavery. In the legal sense, I know that there are maybe 30 million enslaved people in the world, but you can see that it's illegal and it's immoral. And I think this is another vision that we need for the future, that the current unsustainable pathways are not morally correct. And the last trend, also mentioned this morning, perhaps one of the most powerful ones, is the urbanization, a fundamental development. Half of the humanity lives in the cities. It might be 80%. In coming decades, by the middle of the century. UK, for example, and other industrialized countries are almost 90% urbanized. And if you look at BRICS, it's absolutely breathtaking. BRICS are not only catching up, I would say they're leapfrogging. And that again means that we need a fundamental transformation. So these are just some of the examples. Let me conclude my examples by showing you an energy picture. This is the energy that reaches the consumer. And as you can see, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, it was 100% solid, with disastrous effects for human health and life expectancy. But today, still half of the humanity cooks with solids. The other half is fortunate to have the liquids, and even better, energy, gases, and electricity. This is donated by the grids. This is one of the major findings of the Global Energy Assessment that was just concluded with 500 authors around the world, that we need huge investments to resolve the energy story, and that will have many co-benefits. That's true for food, and it's true for water. So let me just conclude by observing that's also reflected in the IIASA research structure. Beginning of the next 40 years of IIASA future, we have the three problematic areas, the pillars of IIASA: energy and climate change, food and water, poverty and equity. But the real focus of the work is on the intersections. It is on the integrated view and holistic view of these problems. And for that, we are also using the drivers, the methods of systems analysis, and hopefully doing also policy relevant work. So this is really what I wanted to say, but I want to end up with one vision that I think is very stimulating. If you think about it, just a few words. This is a vision of Henry Palmer from 1824, almost 200 years ago, of a monorail. And he was exceedingly successful with that. We had many monorails around the world, but you see that he got one detail wrong. He hoped it would be sails and horses. That would have been probably more sustainable, a hybrid system. So he was wrong on the detail, but he got the big picture right, and I hope that that's what science can do, that we can get the big picture right. Thank you very much.